subscribe. Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG, welcome to another video. Today, we're going to be looking at some of the awesome new Jurassic Park cards that they've printed in the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So the plan today is we're going to give you an overview of all the new decks that you can build with these cards. We'll go over what each of the decks is trying to do and some cool cards for you to include. First up, we have Ellie and Alan Paleontologists. They are 2, a green, a white, and a blue, for a 2/5 legendary creature human scientist. They have the ability to tap and exile a creature card from your graveyard, discover X, where X is the mana value of the exiled card, activate only as a sorcery. What that basically means is that you exile a card from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with the mana value of the exiled card or less. You then get to cast it without paying its mana cost, or you put it into your hand, you put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It's kind of like a fixed version of Cascade. So that's the commander, what's the plan? So basically with this deck, we are going to be wanting to put as many big creatures into our graveyard as possible, and then we're going to exile them so we can cheat more big creatures from our deck into play. What we're looking for is big dumb creatures that can put themselves into the bin. This is so we can make our graveyard nice and big. It's an extension of our hand, it's an additional resource. That'll give us a ton of fuel for our commander, so we can then cheat something big into play. The other part of the deck is we're going to be running some untap effects, so we can use our commander's ability multiple times in a turn to cheat in a really big board state. So that's the plan. Let's go over some key cards. Firstly, we're going to go over some big cycling creatures that put themselves into our graveyard. What we're after is either really big casting costs of creatures, something like Titanoth Rex or Angel of Ruin. We also like really cheap cycling costs with things like Eagles of the North and Generous Ent. Or we like cards that have effects when you cycle them, things like Krosan Tusker and Chefnet Monitor. These get us lands, they help us ramp, we like that. Then we have some other cool creatures that naturally put themselves into the graveyard. You have cards with channel abilities like Mirashell Crab and Colossal Sky Turtle. Great creatures that also give us some cheap utility effects. The last section of creatures that put themselves into the bin for us is creatures with Evoke. These come into play, give us a nice bonus effect like drawing cards or answering threats, and then go straight to the graveyard ready for us to dust them with our commander. The next part of the deck is effects that can untap our commander, so we can use it multiple times in a turn. There's plenty of these effects out there, so you can really run whatever you have or what works for you. For the rest of the deck, you want between 8 to 10 bits of ramp, 8+ bits of removal, throw in some protection, and you've got yourself a deck, let's go. Next up, we have Indominus Rex Alpha. It is 1 hybrid Dimir green for a 6/6 legendary creature dinosaur mutant. As it enters the battlefield, discard any number of creature cards. It enters with a flying counter if a card discarded this way had flying. The same is true for First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Hexproof, Haste, Indestructible, Lifelink Menace, Reach, Trample, and Vigilance. It also has, when it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each counter on it. To me, the most important keywords that we're after are flying and indestructible. Basically, we want evasion, we want protection on our big dumb commander. I'll be honest, it would be double strike, but at the moment I couldn't find any creatures that we can run that would actually give it double strike, which does suck a little bit. There are so many awesome creatures out there that we can run in this deck to just pitch to our commander. Generally, we're looking for things with at least 3 keywords. You have things like Mag Swiftwing, Nightveil Predator, Nighthawk Scavenger, Venomthrope, Questing Beast, Miri the Cursed, and Scavenged Brawler. So there's some awesome cards we can run to just pitch to our commander, but we can run cool effects like this in all of the other sections of the deck as well. So for things like our ramp, we can run cards like Birds of Paradise, Ornithopter of Paradise, Sylvan Caryatid, and Leyline Prowler. They're awesome bits of ramp, we can also use them to give our commander things like flying or hexproof, which we all love. When it comes to our removal, we can also run creatures that have cool abilities. You can run things like Aberrant, Bone Shredder, Murderous Rider, Trigon Predator, Necrotal, Acidic Slime, and Dalek Drone. These are all great at removing threats, but again, we can use them to help buff up our commander. When it comes to card draw, I generally start with the classic green style strategy of cards that when a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get to draw a card. Things like Guardian Project, they'll be really good in this deck. You can then top this up with the best bits of card draw that blue and black have available to them. Some key cards to consider is that firstly, if we have Archfiend of Ifnir in play and cast our commander, we're basically wrathing all of our opponent's creatures when we discard our hand to it. You then have a card like Flood of Tears, which is also basically a one-sided wrath. It bounces everything back to everyone's hand, and then lets us put the Rex back into play again. Importantly, as this ability is an ETB effect, not a cast trigger, we then get to discard our creatures, and then we end up with a massive beta and no one else has a board state. And then lastly, probably the most fun card in the deck is Living Death. This lets us get back all of the creatures that we've discarded throughout the game and is generally a fantastic card that I will personally run whenever I can. Moving on to our next commander now, and we're keeping it Sultai with Henry Wu, InGen Geneticist. It is a black, a green, and a blue for a 1/4 legendary creature human scientist. It has Henry Wu and other creatures you control have exploit, which means when a creature with exploit enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. Whenever a creature you control exploits a non-human creature, draw a card. If the exploited creature had power 3 or greater, create a treasure token. So how we're going to be building this deck is a Aristocrat Sacrifice Matters deck. We're going to be using non-human token makers to make us a cool board state, and then running a bunch of good humans that when they come in will eat those tokens. This will cause us to draw cards, while also triggering a bunch of really cool effects. So let's start with the non-human token makers, and there's a ton of really cool options out there. I really like cards like Awakening Zone, Catacomb Sifter, Compy Swarm, Pawn of Ulamog, Scoot Swarm, Arasta of the Endless Web, From Beyond, and then good old Avenger of Zendikar. You then have some really good human cards, things like Priest of Forgotten Gods and Yawgmoth Transposition, which are great sacrifice outlets that give us some additional value. You then have Zulaport Cutthroat and Sir Conrad the Grim, which are fantastic Blood Artist effects which drain out our opponents, which is just what the deck is trying to do. For your ramp, I'd recommend having it as much beyond creatures as possible, so things like Mana Dorks are absolutely perfect here. With your card draw, again, you're looking for ones that reward you when you cast creatures, and also then topping it up with the best bits that Sultai has to offer. Interaction-wise, a mixture of creature removal and instant speed interaction is what you're after. And then when you're building the deck, I'd recommend having roughly 50% humans, 50% non-humans, or effects that make non-humans. Just gives you that nice balance so you're always going to be having things to sacrifice and things to sacrifice them. Some key cards to run. Firstly, I really like Mazarek Cruel Death Priest. It makes your whole board extremely big, as we're just continually sacrificing things throughout the game. Then lastly, a really powerful human is Champion of Landbolt. It's a card that grows as you put down creatures and then makes your whole board unblockable. It's just consistently a really powerful card. Okay, we're back on the dinos now with Indoraptor, the perfect hybrid. It is one hybrid Golgari and a red for a 3/1 legendary creature dinosaur mutant. It has Bloodthirst X, which means it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the damage dealt to your opponents this turn. It also has Menace and Enrage, which means that whenever it takes damage, choose an opponent at random. It deals damage equal to its power to that player unless they sacrifice a creature. Okay, so the way we're building this one is with a little bit of group slug, throw damage as much around as possible. We want a ton of ways to deal damage to our opponents and also to all creatures on the battlefield. We're doing this so when we cast the Indoraptor, it comes in as big as possible. But then afterwards, it means we can repeatedly trigger it to take out our opponents. In terms of some key cards, first we have Pestilence and Pyromania. With these in play, we'll always have access to as much damage as we have mana for. You then have cards which can deal damage to any target, importantly to players and to creatures. We want that because it means we can deal damage to our opponents before the Indoraptor comes down, again making it as big as possible, but then also it means after we've played it, we can ping it as well to repeatedly trigger its effect. You have cards like Molten Vortex, Electropotence, Honden of Infinite Rage, Words of War, Court of Ire, Warmstorm Surge, and then you even have some pingers with Kumbai Witches and Fire Slinger. For your removal, Jund has plenty of cool ways of killing things, but in this deck, I personally really like the idea of fight spells, as not only will they remove our opponent's creatures, but they will also trigger the ability of the Indoraptor, which is just more value and more damage being flung around. You can also run a bunch of other cool and powerful cards with Enrage abilities. You have cards like Ranging Raptors, Ripjaw Raptor, Vrondis Rage of Ancients, Polyraptor, and Apex Altasaur. We're going to be flinging around damage with this deck, so we might as well get some more value out of it. In terms of card draw, these colours do have some good instant and sorcery options out there for you. But because we're planning on making the Indoraptor pretty big, you can run spells that draw cards equal to the size of a creature that you control as well. For ramp, I would generally go with things like Rampant Growth effects, specifically over Mana Dorks because the Mana Dorks are probably just going to die. For some cool win cons, you can run more things that make the Indoraptor huge, so that you can either kill with combat damage, or the added buff to its power will mean you can take out an opponent all the quicker with its Enrage ability. You have things like Batterskull, which will also give it lifelink, or something obscene like Colossification. When it's nice and big, we'll deal it damage with our ping effects. so that it then starts firing around damage to our opponents. They either have to take it or start sacking their own permanents. Next up, we have Ian Malcolm, Chaotician. It is 1 blue and a red for a 2/2 legendary creature human scientist. It has, whenever a player draws their second card each turn, that player exiles the top card of their library. During each player's turn, that player may cast a spell from among the cards they don't own exiled with Ian Malcolm, Chaotician. And mana of any type can be used to cast the spell. This is going to have a lot of forced card draw in it, specifically so we can get lots of activations off of Jeff Goldblum. When we do that, a bunch of cards will go into exile. We're going to be topping up the deck with cards that reward us when we cast spells from exile, which fortunately there is now a lot of, and it'll really help us break the symmetry of the commander. Then, lastly, we're going to be rounding off the deck with a bit of chaos. We're going to lean into it a little bit. First up, we have some effects that force everyone to draw additional cards. This is so we can fill up everyone's exile pile for the whole board to play with. You have cards like Fairy Mastermind, Howling Mine, Kami of the Crescent Moon, Vision Skeins, Dictate of Crufix, Fevered Visions, Noggle Ransacker, and Font of Mythos. Of all of these, I personally really like the ones that force everyone to draw an additional card on their upkeep because they're just extremely consistent. To break the symmetry, we have cards that give us a bonus when we cast spells from exile. What you're looking for is cards that either say when you cast a spell from exile, or cards that say when you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand. You have cards like the 12th Doctor, Memory Worm, Iraxa, Empress of Mars, Mizzix Replica Rider, Nalfashni, Keeper of Secrets, and Flaming Tyrannosaurus. Personally, I kind of like the ones that double up the spells that we're stealing from our opponents. So by that I mean Mizzix Replica Rider and Nalfashni. Then lastly, Ian Malcolm's a little bit chaotic. Let's lean into that a bit with some cool chaos effects. These are entirely optional, but I think in moderation these are really fun and can spice up a commander game. You have cards like Calm the Betrayer, Perplexing Chimera, Possibility Storm, Grip of Chaos, Hive Mind, and Eye of the Storm. The rest of the deck fill up with some interaction. Counterspells actually seem really good in this deck, in case the chaos gets a little bit too much, and then fill it up with a bunch of ramps so you can cast your opponent's larger spells. Alright, lastly, we have Blue Loyal Raptor and Owen Grady Raptor Trainer. These are partners. We're going to run them together. So Blue Loyal Raptor is 2 green and a blue for a 5/4 legendary creature dinosaur. It partners with Owen Grady, we love that. It has for each kind of counter on Blue Loyal Raptor, each other dinosaur you control enters the battlefield with a counter of that kind on it. And then obviously Owen Grady is 1 red and a green for a 3/2 legendary creature human soldier scientist. It has partner with Blue Loyal Raptor, and tap to put a choice of a menace, trample, reach or haste counter on target dinosaur, activate only as a sorcery. So the plan with this one is to get Chris Pratt into play, get blue into play next, and then get as many different counters onto blue as possible and start playing the best dinosaurs available to us. All the subsequent dinosaurs will come in with the counters that we have on blue. This will make them all better. We can then turn our beefy dinos sideways to win a game of Magic. So first up, we need some ways of getting counters onto blue. Obviously, Chris Pratt can do that, and to boost that up, again you have some untap effects, meaning you can put multiple counters onto blue in a turn. You then have some cards that also put different types of counters onto a creature. So again, we can stick them all on blue, ready for the rest of our dinos to come in afterwards. You have cards like Vastwood Fortification, Heightened Reflexes, Sudden Spinnerets, Frill Scare Mentor, Fully Grown, Titanoth Rex, and Sanctuary Smasher. All absolutely fantastic in the deck. Talking of the rest of the deck, you are then going to jam-pack your 100 cards with the best dinosaurs available to us in these colours. So out of all of these commanders, if you're looking for one to just play your favourite dinosaur cards, this might be the one for you. You have some really awesome options with things like Hunting Velociraptor, Regisaur Alpha, Illuna Apex of Wishes, Karuga of the Macro Sage, Trumpeting Carnosaur, Thundering Spineback, the why is it not legendary Ravenous Tyrannosaurus, and then the stupidly big Itali Primal Conqueror. Jam the deck with 10 bits of ramp because again we're going to have lots of big dinosaurs that we want to cast, 8 or so bits of interaction, and then a bunch of card draw. You have plenty of options in Teamer, you have blue, and then importantly you've got yourself a deck. Well, by God we did it. I hope you liked the video. Do like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me know down in the comments which is your favourite from the Jurassic Park set. Which one are you thinking of building and making a good dinosaur time with? Do let me know, I'd love to hear it. But until next time, I will see you all soon. Goodbye.